like an IT solution provider based in the Midlands, quickly approaching our 40th anniversary. We're effectively a team of experienced IT consultants and act as a go-to for our many long-term clients. We have particular strength in education and public sectors and provide a full end-to-end range of IT services, including infrastructure solutions, support and managed security. We thrive on business relationships and collaboration with the experts, and Watchguard, who we're proud to be in partnership with today, have proven themselves in terms of their overall knowledge and their rich, easy to manage portfolio of security services. Mike Penkerville from Watchguard has been amazingly supportive of Nike over the last couple of years and will be delivering today's presentation covering trends in the security arena, including threat prediction, types of attack that are becoming a daily concern, and a general industry analysis that we hope you'll find of value and interest. Thank you very much again for your time. You might notice you're muted, so any questions, please send via the chat and we'll do our best to address in the Q&A. So thanks again, and without further ado, Mr. Penkerville.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. And as Kevin says, thank you for your time this morning. I'm Mike Penkerville. I'm what's called a named account manager at Watchguard. Been here very nearly 7 years, and in the IT security industry for about 15 years. And I have the pleasure of being able to present to you this morning some industry knowledge, some research that we gathered working in conjunction with some of our partners, and going through some of the threats as we see them, and giving you some insight into the new year and what we think is going to happen in the new year, as well as how we can help mitigate some of those threats. As Kevin said, feel free to ask questions as we go along in the chat window. If I spot them and can address them as we go along, I will. Otherwise, we'll pick them up at the end. So with that, I'll get started. We're going to take approximately 20-30 minutes of your time this morning just to go through this analysis. I'm going to start with some research that the Information Commissionaire's Office conducted, of which I've summarised here for you. And there, as I'm sure you know, are the organisation who you have to report a breach to if you lose any PII data, personal identifiable information, or indeed any data around financial institutions, etc. So they gather statistics on the threats that they see. That gets fed back to the various cybercrime organisations around the world to help build solutions and make general awareness higher on how we can mitigate those threats and how we can deal with them. And as you can see here, we're looking at the number of incidents per type of industry. So a standout one there is health. It is always being a target for malicious actors out there, but it's quickly followed by the likes of education and childcare, local government and retail. They seem to be the ones that get targeted because they have data-rich information that could be reused, resold on the dark web. And you can see there that there are different types of threat there. The colour bandings show us the different types of security incidents that were incurred. And they go further and deeper to show what was deemed to be the root cause of those threats or those losses of data. So if we look, for example, at the education market and indeed across many of them, with the slight difference in health, we can see that the majority of those threats, unsurprisingly, began with phishing attempts. I think we all know that that's the #1 threat that's out there at the moment. They're becoming more and more sophisticated. We think of them just as being emails, but as trends that we've seen, and you'll see for the predictions of 2022, we're very much seeing more of those through SMS and messaging apps in phones as well. So they continue to get the highest priority because they allow us to prey on the vulnerable, as they were, and the unaware, and they're mostly orientated around trying to steal credentials, because if you get the log-on credentials of an individual, you've got the keys to the kingdom. But you know, it's not just phishing we need to be aware of. As you can see, it's the next largest chunk in there continues to be ransomware. It is the way about most of them go, obtaining the big money. trying to extort money out of organizations for stealing this. But what we're seeing is this kind of double jeopardy that is being reported. So not only are they extorting money for those unfortunate businesses that they've managed to encrypt, they're actually reselling the data that they collect on the dark web. And, you know, if that's things like credit card data or personal information, that other organizations, malware actors will purchase that to then try and launch something else. So we have to watch out for that double jeopardy incident that's in there. We're also seeing quite a rise over the course of the year, and you know, this is a continuing theme from last year around opportunistic attacks. We're finding that, particularly in the case of phishing and SMS, they're orientated around news. So these can be targeted worldwide, they can be targeted to a specific country, and they tend to follow themes that people are likely to want to find out more information about. So you can see the NCSC organisation talk about over a quarter of the incidents in the past year were focused around COVID messaging, or, you know, go and get your jab, follow this link to book your jab, and that you have to collect sensitive information for those individuals, which can then be perhaps used to extort or infiltrate a business afterwards. And what we do, unfortunately, see is many organizations and the users within them repeating their credentials, using passwords across multiple sites. So if a malicious actor manages to gather some login information, they'll try and use it across social media, they'll try and use it across a business to see if you're reusing those passwords, so that they can perhaps gain entry to sensitive data. So those opportunistic attacks continue to work. That's why phishing simulations and phishing protection is so important. And I don't see that changing anytime soon, and that's certainly part of our predictions for 2022. Earlier in the year, Watchguard conducted a survey with SC magazine, where we worked with them to conduct a survey to gather information about how IT managers and business owners see the threats that are out there, what they've encountered, and perhaps what's preventing them from being able to deal with them in the manner in which they would like to be able to. So there are further details on those links, which we'll share after this webinar as well. But I'm going to take you through a couple of facts and figures that were gathered about what our customers and other organizations out there are seeing as the threats, and what's preventing them from dealing with them in the way in which they would like to. And the first one, we asked about what are the greatest threats to the business. And I think, unsurprisingly, as you've seen from the Information Commissionaire's office, the number one concern for businesses and those that are accounting continue to be phishing, and that's proven in the Information Commissionaire's details, closely followed by ransomware and authentication attacks, those stealing of user credentials. And these are what are considered to be the threats, as well as those encountered. New one that's kind of popped up in the past 18 months since we've all been working from home and looks like we're going to continue to for some time, is specifically remote employees. We're all, you know, having to work in temporary environments, but businesses are now considering about this new work-life balance that we're all trying to achieve, where we're trying to extend the workforce, you know, into temporary locations, perhaps from home, and how do we push our security barriers out to their environments, ensure that they're secure when they're not working on the conventional network. So we need to be very mindful of pushing that protection out to devices and users when they're not behind a traditional firewall or on the conventional network, so that we protect them from the likes of phishing, authentication attacks, ransomware, etc. And you know, the other one that's in their file is malware. You may be aware is particularly a type of zero-day threat, which we're going to talk about a little bit more as we go along, that we need to be aware of, that doesn't include a traditional attachment that's coming in that email, usually in a phishing attack. And those phishing attacks are becoming much more sophisticated. They're being targeted these days at what are considered to be those users that have elevated credentials or perhaps access to sensitive data and systems within a business. So we need to be very aware of how we go about protecting those individuals. Watchguard gathers a number of feeds from the systems that we've deployed around the world. So when a customer deploys one of the Watchguard solutions, and much like lots of other products that we install these days, you're asked for permission to share anonymized data with us, with the vendor, so that we can gather threat intelligence to enable us to build better solutions for you, to be aware of what threats we're seeing out there in the business so that we can protect you as effectively as possible. And this internet security report, we produce it quarterly. There's also a live version on a website called simplicity.org, where you can go and get the latest facts and figures about what we're seeing that's out there in the world. And 3 highlights I wanted to pull out of some of the more recent reports. So we used to think that all attacks landed mostly in the Americas because that's what makes the big news. But as I think you can see there that Europe is those that seem to encounter more attacks than any other part of the world seem to be targeted there. We've got malicious actors, you know, being opportunistic, as we've said, and certainly Europe in the past year with the pandemic outbreak has meant that we were perhaps more vulnerable to systems being breached because of our the way we had to react to remote working and perhaps weren't as prepared as we could be. And we're seeing a massive increase in what we call zero-day malware. And for those that you don't know, zero-day malware is the unknown. Those are vulnerabilities that we didn't even know that existed, that were perhaps unpatched, that we need to deal with just as soon as we can.
Someone's at the front door.
Excuse me. So we need to be able to deal with those just as quickly as we can. They usually result in patches coming out from the vendor. But in the meantime, we need to be able to recognize when they happen and be able to deal with them in some intelligent way, be able to sandbox and quarantine whatever's most appropriate. And the statistic at the bottom that you see there, the zero-day malware, that analysis I literally pulled this morning for this set of slides. So that of the last 12 months worth of data that Watchguard solutions were in place, 92% of all the malware, the likely encryption events of ransomware, start with trying to exploit some kind of zero-day malware or zero-day exposure to the business. And this...
Someone's at the front door.
Sorry about that. These new technologies we're all implementing. So that zero-day malware is something we need to be able to address just as soon as we can. And I'm going to show you a little bit about how Watchguard can deal with those. Remote working, as we picked up, is a theme that's happened over the past 2 years. It was something that was a relatively minor pre-pandemic, as you can see from the statistics we gathered from a Forbes survey and contribution with Microsoft. Before this pandemic was in place, approximately 38% of the workforce worked from home or worked remotely at some point in the business, and that has risen to very nearly 80% in the past 12 to 18 months. And many businesses are saying they're never going to return to offices in the conventional way. So we need to be able to deal with extending that security protection to those remote workers, and specifically their usernames and passwords and the devices that they use when they're off network. We need to protect the users, and we need to protect those devices that they go into insecure or unsecure environments, such as, you know, behind the BT Home Hub at home, or whether it be a remote working office that's been set up on a temporary basis. So we need to be very aware of how we go about protecting users when they're off network as well as on network. And to that point, what we're seeing about those risks to those remote workers is around credentials. It's around that username and password that they're using. So when a user's working remotely, you know, they're taking their corporate devices with them. They might be using a personal device to access, like the mobile, etc. And, you know, we still got these weak passwords in place. We can put things in place to change passwords from month to month, or whatever your deemed appropriate business policy is, but they are used over and over again. There was been variety of reports, and Verizon's an example I've used here, where on average, in a lifetime of a typical user, there'll be something like 80 online logins that you've got, you know, dating back to social media and across business solutions as businesses change them as well. And we can't remember that many passwords. We're only human, and we tend to cycle a few of them or variations thereof. And when we're forced to change them every month, there's you know, the common joke about just changing one digit at the end. We need to be secure with those passwords and make them as strong as possible, and perhaps introduce other methods of being able to secure logins. Public Wi-Fi has been a common weakness. It's kind of the dirty little secret in IT security for a number of years now, because it's insecure. You know, now when you log on with your phone or with your laptop, it pops up and it says there's weak security here. Be aware of what you're doing. The VPNs will only get you so far. They're not always the easiest things to be able to set up and use for, you know, just conventional users in a business. So we need to be very aware of what we're doing in those spaces and secure the appliances as much as possible. And, you know, that's what I said. They're trying to steal those credentials wherever they can. The other rise that we've seen, particularly in the past 2 years, as we've had these remote workers, is in regard to those remote connection vulnerabilities. We tried to set up solutions that have enabled those remote workers to connect to the business, connect to those systems that they need access to within the business to enable them to continue to do their jobs. So what we've seen is malicious actors targeting those remote connection tools. They're trying to exploit zero-day malware opportunities. They're trying to use old technology and breach that in terms of remote access systems. So because if they can do that and they get on the inside out, then they get access to everything that goes through it, which enables them to be able to capture it. So we need to consider about how we go about protecting those remote users. And when you work with Watchguard, there are a number of things that we try to do to help you. And the theme in Watchguard is very simple. It is trying to bring enterprise-grade security to the masses, to the medium-sized businesses and small businesses. We work with organizations all the way from 2 to 5 users through to multiple thousands of users globally around the business. And we try to set it up in such a way that it's simple to deploy, provides you visibility, and gives you that intelligent protection, that high grade security that's going to be able to protect your business across a number of different solutions. And we do that in 4 specific areas. So the one that most people know Watchguard for are red boxes, are fireboxes. They're firewalls. They're available in both physical devices, virtual and cloud. We work in AWS and Azure as well. So in hybrid environments, we can protect all places within the business, however you choose to deploy your network. They provide the usual kind of tool set that you would expect to be able to see, in that they will help do things like protect users from going to websites that they shouldn't, using web blocking technology, but they also include some sophisticated antivirus type tools, as well as some zero-day malware protection in the form of machine learning, AV, sandboxing type technology, and DNS level protection. DNS is the key to protecting yourselves against phishing attempts. As those links that come in, the first thing that happens is that there's a DNS call, and that's a great way of being able to protect a business. So that's built into our network security tools. And all Watchguard appliances come with support directly from Watchguard, which can be enhanced by our partners such as Nike. But they also include our visualization tools to enable you to be able to see what's going on in the business as well. In terms of those users and protecting their credentials, then multi-factor authentication is the key. We've seen all sorts of organizations do this. Most people are aware of the Google or Microsoft way of being able to do these things. But whatever solution you choose, please use a cloud-based platform. It is the most simple way of being able to deploy multi-factor authentication. And if you're not sure what it is, it's the challenge you get when you log into a system. When you log onto your bank, they do it now. They send you a text message and you have to put the code in. Fortunately, text-based multi-factor or 2-factor authentication is vulnerable, as we've seen with those SMS messages that you get on your mobile inviting you to redirect a delivery. That it's not a great way of being able to protect your users' credentials. So we prefer to use something called multi-factor authentication, and this is it best explained by a use case. So, for example, when I log onto my laptop in the morning, I type in my username and password, and my phone pings and says, "Are you trying to log in from Lancaster, where I am, on a Windows 10 device at this time of the day?" And it's simply yes or no, I'm trying to do that right now, and then you pass through into the system. The great thing about our multi-factor authentication solution is it doesn't just work with Watchguard solutions. You can protect the likes of any cloud-based or operational software such as Office 365, Salesforce, Dropbox, etc., with tight integration. And the tools that we make available enable you to be able to do that for many, many users very quickly. Watchguard ourselves deployed this a couple of years ago now. We're approximately 1,200 employees around the globe, operating in just about every region in the world. This solution was deployed in less than a week to all our users within the business to secure our user credentials. We mentioned Wi-Fi, and Wi-Fi is, as I said, the dirty little secret of IT security, in that it is particularly vulnerable to types of attack. Watchguard has patented technology to keep the airspace clean, to keep it secure from prying eyes, malicious actors who spoof the SSID that you connect to try and capture that data as it goes through. The new Wi-Fi 6 technology in WPA3 goes some way to be able to help you here. And the good news is Watchguard can work all the way through that technology for you with a cloud-based platform to be able to deploy very quickly and simply and integrate with those other solutions that we talk about. And then finally, and more recently, we've introduced endpoint security. We do traditional endpoint in terms of antivirus, which are those non-zero-day threats, the things that we know about, using signatures to protect a business. But more importantly, we have a product called Endpoint Protection Detection and Response. And this is zero-day, zero-trust malware protection on the endpoint. It's a way of being able to secure those devices from either installing or having applications run and processes run on the endpoint that are perhaps trying to expose weaknesses in that endpoint that haven't yet been patched and leak data, or worse, a piece of ransomware getting in and encrypting that device. And it's really sophisticated endpoint protection, ties in with everything else that we do there, including an off-premise DNS protection to be able to prevent those users from going to websites that shouldn't when they're off the network, but also protecting them from those phishing attempts that we talked about that are a major threat to most businesses. What's different about Watchguard in particular in this space is that we have a threat hunting team that comes with this solution. It's not an extra. So there are people back in our threat labs constantly examining the threats that we see and building in new technology and new products, and giving you the tools to be able to identify when those threats are encountering the business. For those of you who are familiar with the MITRE framework, we map threats against the MITRE framework and identify at what stage that attack's at, all the way from the early days of trying to steal credentials, all the way to the other end where they're trying to encrypt your device. So giving you great insight and visibility in there to be able to protect devices both on and off network. What's different about the way Watchguard do this is we have what we call our unified security platform. The more you invest with Watchguard products, the more coordinated and unified it is. Well, as I've said at the beginning, with the simple protection that we're trying to provide you, the sophisticated, comprehensive security, is we have a complete portfolio of products from end to end. I describe it as we protect the network, the user, the device, and your Wi-Fi. Those four areas you need to be able to protect with a sophisticated join-up control. Watchguard Cloud, our management platform and our visibility platform, is a standard feature across all of those solutions that I've talked about. One platform, one single pane of glass to be able to see every product that we do, with the shared knowledge and the continual talking of those technologies to each other to be able to share information about the threats that we're seeing. If an endpoint encounters some kind of malware, it talks to the firewall about the potential communications that it's seeing going on there, so that we can bring in an automated response wherever possible. Because you need to be able to deal with it as quickly as possible. We're not, the IT team isn't always there 24/7 to be able to recognize and respond to those things. So wherever possible, we try to automate that, and that's aligned with trying to be operationally clever as well. So we have a number of different integrations with third-party products out there in the world, because we recognize you're not always going to use Watchguard solutions for every one of your business security needs, but they need to integrate with the likes of Office 365, your phone system, etc., to be able to provide the holistic view of your security and make it easier for you to be able to manage and protect the business, along with flexible payment models. We work all the way through upfront payments, through monthly payments and annual payments, in order for us to be able to provide security that matches your business income and your preferred manner of being able to work with an organization to deliver security to your business. We do this through this security platform, which I've mentioned starts with Watchguard Cloud, a single platform, no extra cost. It comes with every product that we deliver to enable you to be able to manage those 4 different product portfolios and share the data that works across all of them. There's an identity framework that shares information about the users, so you only need to log in once, and we share the information across Watchguard. But it's more and more sophisticated, more comprehensive, the more you invest with Watchguard and join those solutions up together. And that threat sync layer, which is the sharing of information and threats that we see across those 4 different products, means that we can be sophisticated about the knowledge that we have and how we automate the response to them, combined with, as I say, operational ease in the form of integration and various consumption models. Our customers range from big to small, as we've described. We work across retail with different types of hotel groups. We work with plenty of educational establishments, both big and small, from primary school all the way through to colleges and universities, as well as many charitable type organizations and global names that I'm sure you recognize on there. So big or small, Watchguard has a solution that will work for you and a price that works, as well as a consumption model, as we've talked about. I'm going to finish with what's going to happen in 2022, and this is fresh off Watchguard's website. It's literally only been there 2 weeks or so. And our CTO, a guy called Corey Naquine, a very clever guy, leads our threat security team to look at the threats, as I say, that we encounter with Watchguard solutions, and where we think the trends and where the threats will be next year. And they've highlighted 6 areas that you can see on there about where we think those threats are going to come from. Some are going to affect you, some aren't, but you will see that they generally have a very good idea about where these things are going, and they're delivered in very a comedy fashion. It's like a news program going through each one of these about where these threats that we see. The likes of things like SMS and spear phishing, as we talked about, and different types of platform. It's not just SMS anymore, it's likes of WhatsApp and various other communication tools. But even things like MFA and this concept that Microsoft, for example, have introduced of passwordless authentication, using your face and various other ways of being able to do it. They can be breached too, which is why MFA is so important. So I'd strongly encourage you to go and watch these. There's a little 5-minute video in each of these areas that will help you consider the threats that are coming in 2022 and what you need to protect yourselves. So with that, this is the end of the presentation, and I will invite Kevin to let me know if there have been any questions as we go along, and indeed if there are any that popped up in chat.
Thank you, Mike. That was fantastic, very insightful. We've recorded the session, so we'll send out links so people can refer back to some of these links and information.
Sure.
We have had 1 or 2 questions. It seems to have struck a nerve around the fact that Omicron is forcing people back to the home office, and one of the questions was around remote workers. Are there best practice approaches for how we can bigger firewalls for remote locations and remote users, and
Sure.
and also around the endpoint security, how that all knits together as a solution for home workers.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. As you can imagine, we've done a lot of this in the past couple of years, and with new and existing customers as we've gone along. So the traditional manner in which you do this is using a VPN. It's a tunnel from the corporate device that they take home back to the office to encrypt and secure communications between them. The issue was that most appliances that were out there when this pandemic first hit weren't big enough or capable enough of dealing with remote users in such volumes. The great news with Watchguard is every one of our devices comes licensed with maximum connectivity. We don't charge extra for incremental user access, but we also have the ability to spin up, as I said, virtual and cloud-based firewalls. So these can be considered temporary because they're software-based solutions. You don't need to invest in hardware necessarily, so that you can provide an alternative route. So you can spin it up in a virtual or cloud-based environment specifically to be able to provide that connectivity as you need. And as I said, one of the great ways is that we have models that enable you to be able to pay for that monthly. So we can scale up and down as and when necessary in a virtual or cloud-based environment, which means we can react very quickly. In terms of securing the endpoint themselves, this is critical. I can't stress it enough. When you take these devices home, as I do here with the laptop that Watchguard provide me, we need to make sure that device is as secure as possible, whether it's connected over a VPN or not. So we do that with our EPDR solution that implements that zero-day protection on the endpoint to make sure nothing malicious runs on it. But we combine that with a couple of other technologies as well. So I mentioned DNS control. We have a solution called DNS Watch Go, which will protect you against phishing attempts and links to malicious websites and potentially bot websites. And then MFA is key. I can't stress it enough. It's the bang for buck. It's the best thing you can deploy to protect your business right now, because we've seen phishing attempts and credential stealing is number one in terms of the attacks that we're seeing. So for example, when I log into my laptop, type in my username and credentials, password, and I am prompted by my phone to confirm that I am indeed trying to log in. So that protects the endpoint from people trying to, as we say, credential stuff the endpoint to be able to get in it, which would mitigate any endpoint protection if you've got anyway, if you've already got the login credentials. So we do a lot to protect the home workers and remote workers there, Kevin.
Brilliant. And you came onto multi-factor authentication there, which sort of prompts the next question. An interest in using it as potentially a single sign-on solution, and how it integrates with not only on-prem applications but cloud-based ones like, for example, Salesforce.
Yeah, so we use this internally at Watchguard, and it's best explained by the user experience. So one of the standard features that comes in our MFA product, AuthPoint, is that you have this ability to use something called an identity portal. It's a web address that you go to, authpoint.watchguard.com/acme or whatever your business name is, and you use your MFA, your strong credentials, to log on to it, and you're presented with icons that represent the cloud-based solutions that you use, that it's integrated with, such that Salesforce, for example, which is the tool that Watchguard use, I just click on the Salesforce icon and I get a single sign-on experience. It passes through the fact that I'm already authenticated and I've proven who I am. So I don't need to remember another password. I don't need to set up another login to connect to it. It automatically passes through my credentials. So it's one less thing, one less password I need to remember to be able to go through there. And there's something like 1,800 different cloud-based applications that we integrate with, as well as all the Watchguard portfolio.
Fantastic. Well, just seeing if there's any more. I think that covers the questions, unless anyone else has got.
There was probably one I should mention that's hit the news this week that might be on people's minds, and this is with regard to the Log4j vulnerability that everybody's asking about across all social media platforms. I'm pleased to be able to say that Watchguard, after a thorough analysis, has determined that none of its products and services are vulnerable to those attacks. We did use some of the middleware, but none of it had any of this vulnerability to being exposed by it, and we've updated all the signatures and all across our product range to be able to protect our businesses and our customers from that vulnerability that we've seen so widespread this week.
Fantastic, reassuring news for current Watchguard users.
It's barely a couple of days old, that one.
Fantastic, brilliant. Well, from my perspective, the only thing I wanted to mention was the fact that around this whole portfolio of security services, we can offer a managed service, which would include carrying out health checks on firewalls, a monitoring service for all deployed firewalls, so extending that cloud management facility, but with a team of people to provide support around that, also firmware updates, patch management, everything you'd associate with a managed service. So if you've got interest in that particular area, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can contact Nike at sales@nike.co.uk. So please feel free to reach out if you've got any questions in that regard. So yeah, just to say once again, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. We hope you found it of interest, and we'll be speaking again very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Merry Christmas.